Patrick Cook here. Welcome to session number 14 of our Mastering Mandelbulb 3D Formulas. Now, in this session, what I want to do is talk about formula properties, sometimes referred to as parameters, sometimes referred to as options. If we take a look at the screen, we see here that we have two properties for the formula by the name of integer power. All right, now a couple little basics about properties. They are the values that are fed into the formula at time of execution. Obviously, Mandelbulb formulas are meaningless until the application actually runs or executes the formulas. Now, these values are normally numeric. I have personally never seen anything non-numeric. All right, so I'm going to have to say that they're always going to be numeric because they're values that are being fed into mathematical equations. All right. Many times the properties will be a zero value. All right. And other times they're going to be pre-populated. Now the pre-populated values are referred to as default values. Let me get another one up here. Again, another formula. I'm just picking one at random. All right. Now, this formula, come on, called Beth432, doesn't have any properties. And you'll run into this from time to time. So there is no way to be able to modify this particular formula. Let me just hit the calculate, and let's see what Beth432 looks like when it's rendered. Now, because there's no properties, I don't have any ability to modify the formula itself. Certainly, I can modify these formula conditions, iteration count, that sort of thing. But there's no properties by which I can modify the actual formula. Let's pick something else. Let's go over here and let's pick amazing box. All right, now I've got three properties here that I can modify. Now, a little bit about saving. If I modify this property, a property, it's a 2. Let's just put a 5 in there, okay? Now, when you change the property values, the original M3F file values are not changed. All right. In other words, you don't change the formula's file or its script by modifying the properties here. The property values that you plug in here are only relevant at runtime when the formula is actually executed by the Mandelbulb 3D application. So, basically you don't modify the M3F file, okay? You modify the runtime by changing the property, but you don't modify the M3F file. Now, pick something else here. Let's say, I don't know. Let's say I'm just picking anything here. All right. So here is a formula with 6 properties. All right. Now I'm just going to prove something here. If I make the box scale, I make that, let's just say 99. All right, click off of that. Now that's the bulb box. Let's go find that bulb box and reload it. it. Here we go. You see how the formula value was reverted? Okay. If you want to save the formula with your property values, the ones that you change it to, you would need to go up and save your project with as an M3P or an M3I. Okay? All right? So I think that's pretty well established. The properties are not saved to the M3F file. They're only as good as long as you have actually, for purposes of executing the formula, and of course those properties will be saved to an M3P. Okay, now you don't know what the range of these properties are. It doesn't tell you. I don't know it. Let's take box scale. Let me tell you. Let's reload bulb box to get all of our default property values in. And when we execute it, when we calculate it, this is what we get. All right. Now I only have one formula assigned. Okay, just one formula assigned. That's what we get. Now, if I come in here, I don't know what the scale is. I don't know what the range is. All right. It could be 0. It could be some negative number, or it could be a very high number, or it could be a fraction. I don't know. Typically, you don't really need to know. It's sort of like experimental. I suppose if you could view the actual composition of the script, you might be able to tell what the range of those properties would be. Typically, you're not going to know. It really is an experimentation situation. So 2, in the case of box scale, is my default. Now, let's try something here. Let's, like I say, we don't know the range. Okay, all we can really do is experiment. The default for this particular property, box scale, is 2. Let's try plugging a 1 in. Okay, and let's see what happens. All right, so if I punch the render on that, that is a very long render time. All right, and we can see here that we really can only just simply experiment to determine what the property should be, what kind of values give us the best result. Now, with this type of a render time, we really don't want to be here. If you try to use this for an animation, I mean, can you imagine taking 5 minutes to render each frame of an animation, say running at 30 or 60 frames per second? All right, that's you're just not gonna get to anything that's publishable for quite a long time. But you can see here that my box scale was a default of 2, and I put it down to 1, and we can see the kind of issues that we're having here with rendering. Now, really, it comes down to experimentation. Now, fortunately, you can bail out of situations like this. I come up here and I hit the stop button. All right, and that's going to stop the rendering. Let me put it back to 2, which is the default, and calculate again. Well, that's much better. Okay? All right. So just to kind of wrap it up here, your properties or your parameters or your options are numeric values that are fed into the formula. that is run by the Mandelbulb application. They are typically, or I'm going to have to say, they're always numeric. And they can be zero. They can be a zero value. That zero is a valid parameter value. And we don't know the range. We don't know the range of each of these properties. It's just that information is just not revealed to us. So what we can do is experiment. And if we get ourselves into a really long render time, we can come up here and we can hit the stop rendering, fix it, re-render it again. Like I've said, working with the Mandelbulb3D fractal generator is really a process of discovery. So when it comes to working with properties, all you can really do is experiment and see what happens. All right. So that's enough for an overview for properties. Let's go ahead and end this session here. Please join me in the next session, and we will continue talking about Mandelbulb 3D formulas. I'll see you there.